Hello and welcome to the Silent Personalities. They called him a genius man who pulled Russia out of darkness, ruler who built an empire powerful enough to shake Europea, father of modern Russia. But behind the glory, behind the war's reforms and victories was a man feared even by his own blood. King so obsessed with survival and absolute power that, one night in a silent palace, he raised his hand against his own son by mourning the heir to the throne was gone. Called it an accident. Others whispered murder, but one truth remained after. That night Peter was never the same again, because this is not just the story of a king, it is the story of a ruler who believed Russia could only survive through fear, discipline, and brutality. A man willing to destroy traditions, friendships, and even family to build an empire that would outlive him. This is the rise of Peter, the Greek king who transformed Russia through blood, war, and absolute power. When Peter was born in 1672, Russia was weak, isolated, and far behind Western Europeans. Trade and military technology were rapidly advancing in the West, but Russia remained trapped in old traditions. Nobles clung to long beards. An ancient customs army was outdated and poorly trained, and the nations had no strong access to the seas, limiting trade and naval power. From the very beginning, Peter's life was shaped by violence and political instability. As a child, he witnessed a brutal palace coup, where armed guards known as the legacies stormed the Kremlin. Blood filled the halls, bodies were dragged through the palace. The young prince saw horrors that would shape his entire worldview. The trauma never left him, and it created one belief deep inside his mind: mercy creates weakness, and weakness destroys nations. Unlike other rulers of his time, Peter rejected the comfort of royal life, was fascinated by ships, weapons, engineering, and military science. Instead of spending time with nobles, he worked with sailors, blacksmiths, and foreign craftsmen. He wanted knowledge, discipline, and control. Not tradition, not luxurious. He grew older. Peter became obsessed with modernizing Russia, powerful and unpredictable. He could shift from calm intelligence to explosive rage, and second shows close to him feared his temper as much as they respected his authority. In 1697, he secretly left Russia on what became known as the Grand Embassy. Officially, it was a diplomatic mission, but in reality, Peter traveled across Europe to study its power firsthand. Visited shipyards, military academies, factories, and universities. Learned how modern armies were trained, how ships were built, how industry and science were transforming European. When he returned, he saw Russia with completely different eyes. Backward frog-lived, he began forcing radical changes, ordered nobles to cut their traditional beard, changed clothing styles to European fashion, reformed the military with modern tactics, built factories, and expanded industry, and pushed education and administration reforms. To many Russians, it felt like their entire identity was being erased. A dress stance was not tolerated. Rebellion was crushed with terrifying force. When the Streltsy rose against him again, Peter responded with extreme punishment. These were arrested, tortured, and executed. Some were publicly hanged as warnings. Others were executed in brutal waves across Moscow. From that moment, fear became the foundation of his rule. But Peter's greatest ambition was not only reform, it was power at sea. Without naval strength, Russia could never compete with Europe. So he launched massive military campaigns against the Ottoman Empire and Sweden. This led to the Greek Northern War against King Charles the. First, Russia suffered humiliating defeats. Swedish army was highly trained and far more experienced, and Peter refused to surrender. Rebuilt his army from the ground up, introducing strict discipline, modern weapons, and European military methods. He turned Russia into a military machine. In 1709, at the Battle of Poltava, everything changed. Russia crushed Sweden in one of the most decisive battles of the era. Swedish Empire's dominance collapsed, and Russia rose as a major European power, but victory came at a devastating cost. Of thousands of lives were lost. Entire regions were destroyed, and war reshaped the land, its people, for to secure Russia's future. Peter envisioned a new capital, a city that would represent his vision of a modern empire. That city became Saint Petersburg, built on swampy, freezing land near the Baltic Sea. Construction was brutal, and relentless workers suffered from hunger, disease, and freezing conditions. Thousands died during its creation, but Peter pushed forward without hesitation. Because for him, empire demanded sacrifice. St. Petersburg rose from suffering and death, a symbol of ambition, power, and contrary. Yet even after all his victorious, Peter faced a challenge. He could not control his own son, Alexei Petrovich, and like his father, Alexei preferred tradition, religion, and old Russian customs, resisted his father's reforms and westernization efforts. To Peter, this was not just disagreement, it was a threat, because he believed that after his death, Alexei would undo everything he had built: the empire, the reforms, the transformation. Relationship between father and son collapsed into fear and distrust. Alexei eventually fled Russia, seeking safety in Europe, but Peter saw this as betrayal, had him brought back under promises of forgiveness, but instead Alexei was arrested, interrogated, and imprisoned. His supporters were also tortured or executed. In 1718, Alexei died in prison after severe interrogation and punishment, whether by torture or harsh conditions. His death marked one of the darkest moments of Peter's reign. A father lost his son and an empire was shaped by that tragedy. Because Peter believed one thing until the end, that fear was necessary for survival, that without sacrifice, Russia would fall, that only strength, no matter how brutal, could build an empire. By the end of his life, Russia had transformed completely. A stronger army, a powerful navy, a growing economy, and recognition as a European power, but all of it came at a terrible cost. A nation reshaped through suffering. And for when Peter died in 1725, he left behind an empire stronger than ever, but also a legacy stained with darkness of him. Today, historians still debate him. Was he a visionary who modernized Russia, or a tyrant who destroyed everything in his path? Maybe he was both, because Peter the Great proved something unforgettable. Greatness can build empires, but it can also erase humanity in the process, and that is why his name still echoes through history, not only as a ruler but as the man who turned power into fear and fear into an empire. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful history documentaries like the Sire. Support helps keep these stories alive, because history is not just about kings and empires, it is about the choices, the sacrifices, and the shadows they leave behind. See you in the next video.